Okay. Good evening and welcome to the October 23rd Special City Council meeting for the consideration of the budget. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Okay, so we're just a few minutes after 6 o'clock right now. I think the intent, and speaking with the deputy mayor, we're hoping that the bulk of this hearing would go to no later than 8, and then by the time we got to 8 o'clock, we could have public comment at the very latest. So that's my understanding. And we also have Ade's going to help us take notes at the podium, and obviously what we want to do is make sure that everybody gets heard and that we have a good conversation going back and forth. And then again, we've got council citizen comment after we've had council discussion and deliberation. I've made sure that all the department directors have their budget books and their PowerPoint presentations, and everybody should have access to their PowerPoint presentations from the previous budget presentations, and we are here to have a good discussion. With that, why don't I, Deputy Mayor Honda, do you have anything to start off with?
I don't believe I do, but I want to thank those who are here in the audience and encourage the council to let us know your feelings and your thoughts on the budget. And remember, we always have another, next Tuesday if we need it, which I believe we may need it, and we can have as many budget meetings as we need to come to the budget that we all can agree on.
Okay, with that, I will open it up to council discussion and deliberation. Council, is there any discussion, suggestions? Obviously, we start off with a starting point of the mayor's proposed budget, and any discussion or suggestions? All right, hearing none, just kidding. I'm kidding. All right. Got everybody, though. Councilmember Copang.
I know this is one of many, but one of the issues, or one of the items that I would like to see funded, and I've spoken to you already about it, is the one of the Violence Prevention Coalition Steering Committee recommendations was to get youth engagement. I think that we have a partner in the city in the Youth Action Team, and I would like to see that program funded to the full amount of $30,000 that they've requested. I think we've already got $5,000 that's been released through the Human Services funding, and I think there's another $25,000 that we need to get to close the gap.
Okay. Now, my understanding from the committee presentation was that there was $50,000 that they were asking, but is it I just want to make sure that we put everything on the table, that $30,000 you believe will actually fully fund that? That there was some staffing, maybe there was some play in that number
There
between
was,
50 and 30?
my understanding was there was some play in that number.
Okay.
I did ask the question, they said we'd take $1. So obviously they were being facetious in that. I think
Yeah.
that $30,000, I've heard that number twice now.
Okay, great.
So that's why I'm using that number.
And I want to flesh that out before we
Okay.
get further down the
Yep.
road. Thank you very much, Councilmember Copang. Deputy Mayor Honda?
I
And
did-
then Councilmember Asafados.
I did want to say that Councilmember Johnson is on his way,
Yes.
and that to the council members, if you, maybe not tonight, but by next week, if you want to add something to the budget, we always have to realize that we have to take something away from the budget. So we're going to be keeping these numbers, right?
Very good.
Okay, and as we add things, think about what you might want to take away.
Okay, so an item description a day, that would be the FWYAT, Federal Way Youth Action Team. That would most likely be driven out of Human Services or Parks, Public Safety? Is that would that be Public Safety or would that be Human Services?
What do they do?
That should be part of the community.
Youth engagement,
services.
could be Parks.
I mean, if we know what their mission is, then we know where we can put it.
Their mission is.
The mission is to lower crime.
It is to lower crime, but it's through activities and sports and was this was presented in the Parks and
So
Human
being-
Services Committee?
So,
You know what, why don't we do this? We can always find a home for it. Actually, let's put this under department, and we'll find, figure out a day. What I would say is, we'll almost have to have a question mark after it. I would put Parks / Human Services / PD ? I would put PD, CD, PK ? We'll figure it out, but I think it could go either, you could argue it could go into any one of those. And then in program amount, we're looking at $30,000
Where would that come from?
or $25,000.
25, additional 25.
I
We got 5 already.
Got it, thank you very much.
I think that's the basis.
And where would that come from?
To be determined. I think what we should do right now is figure out, let's figure out which programs the council very much wants to go, and then what we'll do is we'll figure that out. What we want to do right now is have the brainstorming session and get these ideas out,
Okay.
and then we can kind of go back. That'd be my, council, does that sound like an appropriate course? Yes. I'm seeing some heads nod.
Yep.
Okay, that way we don't get stuck in that gear. Councilmember Copang, does that sound okay? Okay, Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, did you have another comment? Because did I already call on you?
You did, I agree that we will have to find a place where it would come from,
Right.
but perhaps not.
Not right
this
this second,
evening,
and maybe we'll figure that out. Councilmember Asafa-Dawson, then Councilmember, or did you have something?
Yeah,
quick?
this is related to the Federal Way Youth Action Network,
Yeah.
if I may. So it was asked, what is the mission statement? What is Federal Way Youth Action Network? And I know they presented the last Parks and Human
Yeah.
Services Committee.
Yeah.
And their mission statement just simply says, "The Federal Way Youth Action Team is the collective impact of caring adults, youth, and organizations." Their vision statement is to provide authentic, impactful, and relevant youth development opportunities across the Federal Way community. Thank you.
If I can add to that.
Okay, go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry, Lydia.
That's okay. Actually, is that okay? Okay, go
I
ahead.
just want to add to that, it's also that it's got county funding, so it has it would have accountability not only to the city, but to the county as well. And they're
Now-
already reporting out.
And where, I guess what part of the county does that come from? That could inform us where this comes from.
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. I'm not sure it's a PD function. It's a, yeah, it may be, more parks and CD. Councilmember Dawson.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor did talk about what, in terms of, we might have to cut something in order to add what we want to add. I'm interested in the South King County Affordable Housing Task Force. And so that one for me is very important. And I know, again, and it's human services, probably.
Yeah.
And I know currently, we've also already heard from other agencies that their funding level was cut, so I know that's challenging. But yet, I think being a part of this task force is very important, and so I would like to add that to the budget.
Okay, and that would be out of CD/Human Services?
Or like you said, maybe somewhere else, hopefully.
Okay, and then I think they are asking between 30 and 34, is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or was it 26 to 34?
It was 26 to,
Last I saw was 31 to 34, but
it depended on how many staff people they were going to hire.
yeah.
Yeah, it's whether it was going to be one or two. Okay. I asked, did everybody get the email that Brian sent out today about I asked him to do that, about where we're at in regard to what our housing targets are? And, we were, Brian, could you reiterate real quickly, just to make sure? The council got an email, I want to share it with the public and the folks watching at home. Would you summarize kind of where we're at in regard to our housing targets and where this money would be going?
Sure. So there's two different sources that we looked at. One is the Housing Development Consortium publication that they have that I sent to the council a few weeks ago that indicated that Federal Way and actually much of South King County meets its 30 to 80% AMI targets beyond 2030. We also looked at the numbers that we have within, what the ones that we keep track of at City Hall, and based on the targets that we're required to have for that 30 to 80% AMI, we're required to have 28% of our housing supply fall into that category, and currently we have 48% that are in that category. So we have at least 20% of our housing supply that exceeds that requirement, and should well carry us into 2030. The very low end of affordability is one that we're closer to, but many of the other cities are dealing with that issue as well. But in short, we're 20% beyond where, according to the targets that we're required to have, we're beyond that.
Okay. Councilmember Dawson, did you have a?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I've seen those numbers. My concern is affordable housing is really so people are not rent burdened. And so if I can't afford to pay my 30%, whatever that is, and as rent increases, my income does not increase accordingly. So if I can't be within the 30%, it's going to be harder for our people to afford to live anywhere, including Federal Way. And this is not saying to add housing. And so I still support that we fund this project so that we understand or we see what where our city is in terms of affordable housing and where we're going, because people are moving here, like we said, and then if we can't be within the 30%, I could lose my housing tomorrow if I don't have affordable housing. And so I don't think that really addresses what's going on currently. And I appreciate the housing stock, I do understand that, but my concern really is about the people who need housing.
Can we do this? Can we put that range in there? Program amount is 26 dash, I put 26-34,000. In regard to the program amount. See it in the amount? No, over there in the program
Yeah,
amount.
I'm trying to tally it. If I do that, then we won't be able to tally at the bottom.
If you put a
Oh, I
range, it's
see.
not going to tell
We'll
it.
put the higher range in.
So,
Okay, all right, great, okay. So I guess in that item description, yeah, it's 26 to 34 in that box, not 31. There we go. Okay, great. All right.
Thank
Any,
you.
You're welcome. Council, any other items of discussion? And I guess these are either additions or subtractions. Councilmember Moore?
Yeah, thank you. As I recall, I think it's safe to say that this budget could potentially have a lot of focus on youth programming and youth, and which I think is a good thing. And having heard the Parks and Recreation Department, one area that's been identified as a strength that needs to be strengthened, an area that needs to be strengthened rather, is, and I would like to advocate for a teen program coordinator at the community center to be part of the Parks and Human Services staff.
Okay.
So I don't know the amount or whatnot, but clearly the department would be coming out of the parks.
So let's put a teen program, CDR, and then put one FTE. Now, Steve, or John, I see John over there too. John, thank you for coming back from your vacation, and Steve, thank you for being here as well. John, wasn't Schmidt a teen coordinator? Didn't we talk about that before? And then the title has sort of changed over time?
Yes, many years ago, that position was classified as a senior and teen coordinator. The teen aspect has only ever been the Youth Commission, and that's since been reassigned to another member of the staff at the community center. That is actually, the senior program has done so well and demands so much of his time that it is a full-time senior program. And so a teen program, we do not have a teen coordinator, and there's no way to take Dave and cut him. The demands on the seniors are tremendous. He's overproducing at a tremendous level right now in the senior area.
Now, you've had certain number of requests, actually, Councilmember Moore, did you want to ask John any questions about?
No, I'm just kind of going over my list of what I would like to see added, and then
Okay, very good. Do you mind if I ask you just a couple of questions, just to kind of see where we're at? You had a certain number of asks in your department, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Where were those asks centered on? If you could have one FTE in your department, where would you start?
Parks maintenance.
Why is that?
We're horribly short in parks maintenance. We have 1,100 acres, 32 parks, and 9 miles of trail, in addition to 300,000 square feet of facilities that we maintain. With a 12-person staff, we're tremendously short in the area of parks and facility maintenance.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I lied, I do have a question.
Oh, very good. I wanted to get this conversation
John,
started.
you did a survey on teen programming, and you've identified as the director of this whole department that that's an area that's needed to be focused, correct?
Absolutely. It's the one area where we underserve the public, but at this point, considering where we're at with employees, number of employees, and the fact that we've been deferring maintenance since 2007 across the system, that is getting very costly. And then recently, a new phenomenon has raised its head with the prevailing wage situation. We are tremendously short in park and facility maintenance. We're barely hanging on.
John, I need to advise the council, we need to bring the council up to speed on this. Why don't you explain kind of where we're at with the L&I implications of what's happening with these, with a lot of the contracting that we do, and the potential ramifications it has in our budget and what we're faced with right now, because I want to make sure the council at this hearing gets briefed on what's going on. I think some pretty drastic unintended consequences.
Well, that's what I was getting to before John does that, because when we're talking about all these things, it's more money, and where's that money coming from?
Well, I think you guys are going to be shocked at what you're about to hear.
Okay.
There's something that has just come up from L&I that is going to could have some very wide-reaching ramifications. John, can you explain what's going on?
Yes, sir, and I'll tag team with E.J. Walsh, who also is tremendously impacted by this new development. Essentially, landscape services, which we use heavily within the Parks Department, and Public Works uses heavily as well, and I'll let E.J. speak about the implications to the Public Works Department. But generally speaking, we have contracted maintenance, outside landscape maintenance contractors serving 22 of our 32 parks and facilities. So we lean heavily upon landscape companies to help us with mowing of neighborhood parks. We just don't have the manpower to possibly keep up. So we focus our efforts on the larger community parks, such as Celebration Park. We do the landscape maintenance, most of it at Dumas Bay in-house. We do have some contracted maintenance down there as well, because we can't handle all of that. We do Town Square Park, we do Steel Lake Park, we do the school sites mostly, although we do have landscape services at Lakota. I have our Deputy Director, Steve Eichert, who actually manages those contracts, sitting next to me. So if I miss anything, I'd invite Steve to jump in. With this situation being that the fact, so I'm painting this picture, we lean heavily upon landscape maintenance companies to help us to get to where we need to be. And their prevailing wage, for instance, the prevailing wage for a typical laborer was about $17.80 an hour. With the new prevailing wage, it just jumped to 37 and change an hour. That took effect September 1st of this year. That's a tremendous hike. It gets worse. So that is just a laborer, a person who is walking behind a mower, shoveling, raking, line trimming. If they ride a mower, their wage goes from, Steve, was it 27? I believe it was in the $27 range to $62 an hour.
Who did?
There is no government entity that could plan for that steep of an increase, and it is frankly potentially very, very difficult to deal with. I'll let EJ speak to, and to give you an idea, I'll quickly summarize Parks' situation. In 2008, we had $212,000 in landscape services that we used from contractors. We currently budget $55,000. So we had a huge dollar amount in 2008 with cuts through the years. Obviously, we're doing an amazing amount of work for $55,000, but we've had to trim back their scope of work so dramatically that we're barely getting services in a lot of those parks. So that paints a little picture of the park side of this. It's even more dramatic on the public works side, and I'll let EJ take over.
EJ, and before you get started, can you explain how did this, I think Councilmember Duclos was asking, who instituted this, how did it happen in regard to L&I instituting this prevailing wage? Could you walk through that just a bit?
Sure. So I was trying to pull up the email real fast and didn't get it. But so the Department of Labor and Industry implemented this, and they are defending the position they've taken. So they went out and did a salary survey. Typically, the way they base it is off of the negotiated union rates. For this one, there is not a union that represents this labor class. So they actually went to Idaho, Utah. I think it was Idaho. It was either Idaho or Utah, but I believe it was Idaho. and use the rates from there. We've heard just as much feedback from the industry, the people we contract with, in opposition to this, frankly, as we have from our neighboring surrounding cities. We've been talking to some of the other cities around us and how they are dealing with this. And there's not one unified approach, but most of the cities are either working on or looking at bringing these services back in-house. For the purpose of public works, kind of what John alluded to, that is all of the litter pickup services within the public right-of-way and all of the mowing within the right-of-way. Currently, for 2018, we spent $250,000 on that for that budget line alone, just for within the right-of-way. And we've been receiving complaints. We're not doing enough. We're not mowing enough. We're not weeding enough. But that's the level of service we have with the funding we have. And you heard the hourly rates from John. It's more than doubling their hourly rates. So we have a bid on the street. Our landscape contract is up. One of the theoretical things with labor and industry is the rate is set by when your project is bid. So the rates that are in place, the prevailing wage rates that are in place when a project is bid is what carries the duration of the contract. So if you have a long-term contract that was bid prior to September 1st of this year, it would transpire through the end of, and I'll get to why this is important in a second, but the rates would carry through the term of the contract. Our landscape contract for the right-of-ways expires December 31st. We're out of extensions. So extending it's not an option for this one. And we are subject to the new rates. So we're subject to that 3862 that the Parks Director Hutton spoke about. So where kind of we've heard feedback from some of the companies that do work for us and as well as, frankly, some of the companies that do work for some of the neighboring cities is they are having a problem with their labor forces basically running away. If they have contracts that are current that are not getting extended, what they're seeing is they're seeing their staff already leaving, going to companies where they have a city that is using the new rates because, frankly, who doesn't want a $20 an hour increase? So we've already started to see some of our contractors not being able to get the labor to do the work that they're already contractually required to. On the same token, and where this matters to them and where they're fighting back, they full well recognize that our city, as many others, do not have a slush fund of money sitting around to double the cost of the landscape contract. Like I said, that's on the street right now. It opens October 25th in this room. I'm not expecting that to be good results for councils. I'm not expecting that to be a pleasant meeting when we bring that to council. But they all know that we're not going to be able to afford taking a $250,000 contract and turning it into $600,000-$700,000 a year for the same level of service. We've been being asked by, as I said earlier, the residents to increase the level of service, provide more litter pickup, provide more frequent service, mow additional miles of right-of-way. That's not going to be part of this conversation, unfortunately, which brings us to the only other option is to bring it in-house. That's bad for those companies, too. So they are all fighting. There is one city that I'm aware of that has filed with LNI a petition to reconsider. LNI responded to them that they are not willing to, that they did it per state law, and it stands. So that city is attempting to have it being taken up by the legislature. That won't happen until next summer at the earliest, but that would be a change in state law in the way that LNI adopts rates.
So we'll probably have to address this in our legislative agenda. Let's talk to Aaron Yarden. Let's talk to Aaron about that tomorrow. Deputy Mayor Honda?
Has AWC responded, and what are they doing about this?
So AWC and MSRC have both responded to LNI, and they both said this is, I'll paraphrase and say that they responded in opposition to the new rates, and they both got a response similar to what that city got of, we followed state law, State law says that when there's not a prevalent union, you do a rate study. That's what we did, and these are the new rates.
Okay, thank you.
Right. To finish, Councilmember Moore's suggestion, John, what would be the, Director Hutton, what would be the FTE amount for a teen program coordinator? Ballpark.
All in 70, 75 in that area.
Let's just put 70 in for the program amount.
Plus benefit.
I believe that includes benefits. It's in that neighborhood. Call it, I'd say 75, including benefits.
Okay, let's put that on there. And then, who's got their light on? Councilmember Duclos, did you have a suggestion?
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Moore, I see your light on.
Yeah.
Okay.
My other three items that I had is I would like to also add to the list of, I've been talking about this for quite a few years now. I would actually like to add funding for the transparency, financial transparency dashboard, and that would be out of the IT department, I believe is what I've discovered. And I'm going to have to lean on, and I'll have to come back with the price on that. So, and I think, Mr. Mayor, I think that this is really important just because this year we've seen a lot of people asking questions about our budget. And the fact that I'm confident that no one reads this, not many people read this. You know, I want to do whatever I can to empower citizens and to bring more awareness through interactive activities on our website and actually get a hold of the 21st century for our website, for citizens to kind of better understand where money's coming from and how it's working and be able to take a look at 5, 10, 15 years at a time.
Now,
so.
I remember at the retreat about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, this was ballparked at about 11,000. But then, didn't we hear during the budget presentation that it went up to a certain level?
Yeah, so naturally prices change and they go up. So
Do you remember what that price was or who the vendor was?
You know, I'd like to come back with the price on that so I can be firm on that instead of just guessing.
I
Deputy
believe
Mayor Honda?
Thomas knows the price. But
Thomas, sorry to cut you off. I'm
It
sorry.
was very significant, I can't even speak, it was very high.
Yeah. Nothing certainly goes down, if anything.
Okay, so Thomas is going to come
so,
out in just a few moments. He's going to look it up.
So, like I said, I think this is an important tool and opportunity.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that we're able to use this as a worksheet. All right, and you had a third suggestion?
I did, and I would like to advocate to add staff for the IT department. And then, you know, obviously, economic development is really important to us. And so I'd like to entertain a conversation with my colleagues about the interest of adding a staff member to that department as well.
Okay, so Thomas, we are going to need you out here, and then staff for IT, and then the next item is staff for economic development.
So,
Can you, actually, can you add an item a day, number 9, staff for economic development? Okay. So Thomas is out here, and while he's looking for that information to where you could fill it in a few minutes, let's turn it over to Councilmember Tran.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I share with you all about my thoughts and observation before I go into the technical
Sure.
of the budget?
Yep.
Thank you.
Of course.
Well, this is my very first budget, and you know, for the last few weeks, I have heard budget presentations from various departments, and I wanted to thank each and every manager and director for communicating your department's needs to this council. Today, I'm going to share with you my thoughts and observation during these budget meetings. Now, I need to put a disclaimer out there. Number one, my comments are limited to position, not person, okay? So that's number one. And my thoughts are from the business and budget perspective and not intended to any individual or group of people. So having said that, my first comment would be, I was under impression that we are going to do the zero-based budgeting method. In fact, Mayor Farrell said publicly many times that we would use a ZBB. Now, I don't know if there was a breakdown in communication or misunderstanding or the lack of knowledge about ZBB. But what I heard so far, and based on what I read and I learned, and I'm not an expert on ZBB by any means, but I don't think this is ZBB. If I remember correctly, I heard at least one director that come up here and said that basically he was instructed to, along with the other three big departments, to come up with a saving of $250,000 to make up the $1 million shortfall. So with that, I mean, I truly don't believe that we are doing it. Now, I'm fine if we come out and said, well, we're not doing ZBB because we don't have time, we don't have the technical knowledge. I'm okay with that. I'm okay if we can use a different method. But if we are going publicly and said that we are going to do ZBB, then I do expect that we would honor that, and I don't see that. Okay. The other comment that I want to share with you is that I heard over and over about staff overworked, underpaid, staff leaving for more money, staff leaving for better working conditions, etc. While I have no doubt that our staff are working very hard, there's no doubt in my mind. But I am questioning, are they working smart? By that I mean, do they have the tool to do the job? Is there software or some type of automation tool that we can buy to help them work smarter? Have we reviewed our processes to see if we can streamline or eliminate steps that don't add value to our process to make their life a little bit easier? It is easy to say that, we overwork and then underpay or both. But based on what standard? How do we know if we are efficient? The work that I do for the past 20 years, managing your tax dollar, is very similar to some of your work over here. Not all, but similar. I manage budget, I manage staff, I provide training, I make sure that I deliver the performance targets. My work a little bit different than you is this. Because I work for the state government, I don't have the flexibility to offer my staff top dollar, top salary. Of course I want to hire, the people that came from Yale, Harvard, top school. But when, they look at what I can offer them, they laugh. That's the truth. My staff and I work about 30% less than what the city pay. City of Seattle, City of Fairway, Kent, you name it, King County. But why we choose the work that we do? Like I made a statement earlier at the FedRAC's meeting, the number one, the top reasons why people leaving the workplace is not about money. Some, I agree, some. because they need to provide for their family. But if you Google the top reason why people leave, it's not about money. In fact, the top 7 is ranked number 5 or 6. So in order for me to compete with you here and King County and several cities, knowing that I can't pay my employees top dollar, we created the culture where people feel respected, valued, their opinion being heard and considered. And that's how I was able to keep most of my employees. There's the flaw in thinking that in order for us to keep employees, we have to pay them top dollars. That is a wrong thinking. Trust me. Even if you're able to pay your employees top dollars, we are not Amazon, we're not Microsoft. There will be somebody out there, some company out there, have more money than we do, and they will get that top employees. So accept the facts that we can't compete with those companies. Then we need to improve the workplace, create the work culture where people want to be here. People feel belonging, people feel loyal to you, instead of trying to pay for top dollars. You see, the difference between the private company and the governmental agency is that, especially the city or the state or the King County, the private company, in order for them to become competitive, they have to make their product cheaper than the guys next door. That's the only way they can sell it, and the only way they can stay in business. Governmental agency has no reason to do that. We don't need to invent ourselves, because you know why? Because we can always turn around and tax people. Private companies do not have that options, and that's why they constantly reinvent themselves and try to find the ways to make the product better, cheaper. We need to change our mindset. I look at the budget, and I will share with you very soon. I have serious concern about this budget. So, having said that, let me get off my soapbox.
May I respond to a few items?
Yes, please.
Okay. First of all, we went line by line by line, and the underpinning philosophical approach to zero-based budgeting is to make no assumptions. If we did a true zero-based budget, when talking with our, we would come out with a budget in order to meet the needs of this community twice what it is now. We are running such a lean organization that we're really doing absolutely everything we can to meet the demands of this community, as this is a service delivery organization. The other departments, we are not going to cut from the clerks, from IT, from finance. They can't be cut. We took the 4 main departments, and I personally, along with the day, went line by line by line through every budget. And as I'm going through these items, you know, these are experts in their field, and we needed assistance from each one of those to figure out where they feel like they could come up with what we anticipated was in north of $200,000. We were facing a situation in this city in which we were going to have to go $1 million in the red from what we are required to keep by council, which would affect our bond rating. And if we didn't do that, we also would not be able to pay a 2% COLA. So we went, in regard to zero-based budgeting, the philosophical approach is to make no assumptions about there are no sacred cows, and there weren't. And so we were able to squeeze nearly between $800,000 and $1 million out of a budget that's already lean. And we, in regard to efficiencies, we already do the Community Development Department has done Kaizen, and there's a number of different efficiencies that are going on. But with all due respect, there's only one way to cut a grass. There's only one way to be able to, service the fields or, to answer the folks at the counter. And we've been operating under a lot of those. But I also want to say that in regard to your, the people of this city that have worked here have sacrificed a great deal. They went 6 years before I became mayor without a COLA. 6 years. And it hasn't been since I came here and tried to turn around the morale that we started. Every year we've given these folks a COLA, not to keep up with the private sector, but to keep up with the very neighboring jurisdictions that are poaching our best people. And so that's the issue. This isn't about paying, quote, top dollar to people. This is about paying people a fair wage to where they can raise their families and stay in their homes. So that's what this is about. Councilmember Duclos?
I'd like to add to that. We've already lost people because we haven't been able to keep up with the wages that other cities are paying. People come here, they get trained, and then they hire on to other cities who are paying a higher wage for the same position we're paying here. We have lost people because of it. We need more money. That's what we need, to keep good people here. And we want to have good people that will do the job for the citizens that need services. So we're talking so much about cutting. We have cut as much as we really can out of the budget. We really need to look at revenue, new revenue sources that this city can bring in to help keep people here and help run this city.
And we have secured $2 million
Yes.
extra revenue that takes place in '20. And I have to tell you.
I know, but
people-
we don't talk about that. We talk about the positions. We need to talk about the revenue that's coming in to fund these positions.
But if people don't feel like they're getting paid fairly, they will leave.
That's right.
And a lot of the people that are leaving not to go to the private sector, Councilor Tran. They're going to the neighboring city right next door to us, or the one
Yeah.
next door and one north. And so that's what's going on. We're going to get back to Councilor Tran, but Councilor Copeland?
I just also wanted to just weigh in real quickly that I really appreciate our directors and management and the culture that you have worked so hard to create. The time that I spend walking through City Hall and talking to employees about different things, I really do feel like there's definitely a sense of partnership within the city staff to doing a good job for the city. Doing less or more with less is something that I think our staff has been known for years. I'll agree with the Councilmember Tran that I would like to see us use technology if we can, but I also know that there's been a lot of efforts that have been put into creating more efficiencies within the organization. And Director Davis, I think you did talk to the staff directly about the Kaizen efforts and how you did see some value in that, and I think that's an ongoing thing. But again, when I was hearing Councilmember Tran, I just wanted to make sure that someone from the council spoke for their observations. And my observation has been that the directors have done a very good job of creating a positive work environment, a culture that cares about what's going on, and where everybody is focused on doing more with less. So thank you for that.
All right, with that, I promise Councilmember Tran. Please continue to Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Tran?
Thank you, Mayor. So let's go to the technical of the budget. Ade, I'm gonna ask you most of these questions.
Okay.
The first question I wanted actually the comments on page number 2 of the budget book. In 2012, we had 278.4 FTEs. You see that, right?
Is that page A2?
Page number 2.
Okay. In the regular budget book, it says reduced workforce. The prudent efforts of past years to balance the budget have put significant stress on the remaining staff. Between 2008 and 2012, the city reduced its workforce from 353 full-time equivalent position FTEs to a low of 278 in 2012. It's page 2 of their budget.
Okay,
A day?
okay,
It's page 2 of the budget book,
yes.
Okay.
under reduced workforce.
Thank you, Mayor. So with the proposed budget 2019-2020, if we approve this, it is going to be at 340.5, not counting the wish list over there. I'll just call that for now. That is an increase of 62.1 FTE, or 22.31%, from the low of 2012 to the next 2 years. Right?
Okay.
So I just want to point that out.
Yeah, okay,
We added 62.1 FTEs from the low of 2012. Okay. I want to go to page number 3, under public safety. Actually, I'm sorry, under the budget highlights, expenditure. Public safety continues to be the city #1 priority. I don't disagree with that.
yep,
However, we are funding 53% of general funds go into this safety, public safety item.
correct.
On top of that, if I remember correctly, there's portion of the POP 1 would go into funding the public safety, am I right?
Correct.
Okay. What else, what other sources of revenue that go into the public safety?
We also have red light. We also have I think both the red light and Prop 1 are major part of funding for the police department, yes. And all of that can also be found on page C, if you were to go to page C79, in that same book, that is where the police department is. And you can follow all the funds that are used to fund. On page C89, you see the general fund, Prop 1, traffic safety.
Okay. So the point I want to make is this. We are investing more than 53%
Of general fund,
of general fund
correct.
into the public safety. And again, I do recognize that public safety is our priority #1. There's no question about that. But then the question from the budget perspective is that, can we afford this? Where more than half of our money will go into one single department. Now, when I look at the FTE's number, the proposed FTE numbers for 2019 and 2020 is 340.5, of which 163 FTEs will go to public safety. That is 47.87% of our FTEs go to public safety. Again, I'm not, questioning is right or wrong. I just want to point out that, can we afford it? Okay? So that's one of the things that I want to point out. If you go to page B1, in 2016, the ending fund balance was $72.2 million,
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. with the proposed budget, that fund is going to be at $43 million with a
Correct.
reduction of 29.25 million in 4 years.
Correct.
Why is that? Where's the money going?
Part of that, I think, in 2014, the council established the required policy for the fund balance. And I do strongly believe at that time, you need to know where you're going, because you won't know when you get there. So the council established the benchmark in terms of what the minimum fund balance should be. After that, then the council decide what needs to be spent. Also, there's a sizable chunk of money for the downtown redevelopment that had been sitting there. It is intended for downtown redevelopment. So it serves no purpose if we're not redeveloping downtown. So a portion of that was also used for the downtown redevelopment. But since then, even though the fund balance has gone down, the policy that the council passed has been maintained, to maintain that minimum amount.
Okay. Now, if you would go to page B35. So, by law, you have to do a 6-year projection.
Excuse me, did you say C75?
B35.
B35, sorry.
Okay. Yes,
So by law, you have to do a 6-year projection,
correct,
correct?
correct.
So if I look at the bottom of that page, again, in 2016, $72 million,
Yes,
and then by 24, if your projection is correct,
yes,
the fund balance will be 33.2 million.
correct.
So in your opinion, are we financially stable if this is a number that we end up in 2024?
If the revenue projection that we have now is what it is, if everything remained the same, what I'm projecting in here is in 2024, the current revenue level would not be able to support the expenses. And I think that is part of why during the strategic planning, the strategic meeting, sustainable revenue was a major issue, which I'm still hoping that the council will follow.
May I just interject? Was that number taking into consideration the $2 million per year with SCORE and the $4 million that were anticipated per biennium that we're going to get from SCORE?
It does not take into consideration what we will get from Lake Haven. A budget, the entire amount of what we're spending on SCORE now. So it is assuming whatever it is that we're spending on SCORE now, we will still be spending that amount.
Okay.
Yes.
So is it fair to me to say that in 2024, the council and the mayor, whoever they are, will have a very difficult decision to make in terms of the budget to keep this city going?
Yes, but I hope the council and the mayor will not wait till that time.
I hope not.
You know, that is, hopefully, that is why we're talking about sustainable revenue, which I think some steps, or like the Lake Haven.
Well, that's why we instituted the steps to add $3 million a year in revenue, $1 million from Lake Haven, $2 million from SCORE. That's $6 million per year added to our revenue. Per budget, I mean, $6 million per biennium.
Well, but all due respect, the money from Lake Haven, we don't know. We don't know if we are going to get it or whether, you know.
That's why this, right. But this is a speculative number. That number doesn't even count the $4 million per biennium that we're going to get in the next 3 bienniums from SCORE. It doesn't take that into consideration.
So,
Or we're going to have to raise revenue some other way as well.
Again, this projection takes into consideration the 2.1 million from SCORE as money that we will be spending as we
Right.
go. Okay.
and that is why, when I look at this number, I'm worried that, long-term, are we going to be financially, stable? Are we going to be able to keep every services that we have? So,
I think the entire council shares that concern, and that's why we took the actions we did.
That's why we did what we did with Lake Haven. That's why we left SCORE.
okay, let's move on to the 7 FTEs. I see reduction from the mayor office. That 7 FTEs came from the PAC, am I right? When we eliminate?
Yes, because the park is no longer, even though we are responsible and we have an agency managing it under contract, they are no longer city employees, correct?
So we eliminate 7 FTEs from the city, and we hire this company to manage the PAC. And I'm in favor of that. I just want to know that, do you know the net saving when we do that?
I think, based on what these people have done, the history, I think it is my good estimate that in the next few years, I think the catch is they will no longer need any financial support from the city. And I think that is part of why the mayor made that decision to have a management team manage that. Yes, for 2019, we have a little bit over 400,000 as part of the support to Performing Arts Center. But I think, either 2020 or after that, I think the support from the city should be, actually part of the information that they are sharing with us is shortly, and part of also what they've done is they will actually be sharing profit with us. So that means there will be additional revenue that will be coming into the city that may actually be used to support other departments. So again, based on what they have done in other entity, when they will do that with us, I think it should be short, but,
Okay. Can we go to page B10, please?
B10.
On the Performing Art and Event Center, there's 1 FTE for projected 2018, and 1 for 2019, and 1 for 2020. If we already hired the Spectra, the management company, to manage this, why do we have this position?
I think part of is an attempt to be responsive to the community. I think that is the mayor's position, that simply because we have a management team, part of the coalition that supported the construction of these facilities are the local communities. I think they need to have access to their building. How do they interact with these independent management team? I think that is part of why Mayor.
I think there's a contractual issue as well, Ryan?
So we are obligated to appoint someone under the contract to be the liaison with the city. This full-time position is also not exclusively for use by the PAC. Right now, that's a large part of her duties, but we are also, the Parks Department is also using this person as a contracting specialist for the Parks Department. So it's probably closer to 0.5 FTEs in later years.
But it's required by contract.
But right now, yes, we have to have someone to do that, and we did not have internal capacity for that. so we hired that person.
Okay, thank you. If you can go to page B14. So this page shows that we are one of the lowest city in terms of, charging taxes.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that we compare apple to apple, because some cities, they do roll in the general tax and the fire district and library into one single,
Correct.
right? So are we compare apple to apple here?
Actually, on this is information generated out of the state auditor's office. But the city, we do produce the PAFA, where I compare the city to Auburn, to Kent, to Renton, and SeaTac, Seattle. Based on that analysis, I think I have shared with the council probably several times, that for the past 10, 11 years, that we had the lowest rate. Out of those, yes, SeaTac has its own fire department. And City of Seattle has its own library and fire department. All the other cities that we compare ourselves to, we are comparable to them. So we are comparable to Renton, we are comparable to Kent, we are comparable to Auburn. To all of this list, I have now checked all of these entities, but for the report that we put out in PAFA, which again is on our website, we are comparable to those cities that we compare ourselves to.
Okay. My last question, because I'm sorry I am taking a lot of time from other council members, but so I promise this is my last question for tonight. I heard the report from Chief Wang said that the first 6 months of 2018, the crime rate went down by 17%. Can you tell me the first 6 months of 2018, how many police officers we have on the force?
I think for now, actually through October, we have about 126 commissioned officers.
Chief, does that sound right?
Yes.
And you're going, you're authorized at this point to?
134.
134. Okay. And you're in the process of hiring up to 134?
That's correct. We're doing several background items.
Okay.
So my question would be, if we are doing so well, if the police department doing so well with 126 officers and bring down the crime rate by 17%, why do we need 134? No, let me rephrase that. Why we need to add 3 more next year? I mean, 2020.
Well, next year, the 3 we're adding for the jail, right? Yeah. Actually, for 2020. Could we get the, do you want the chief to answer that? Do you want a data to answer?
Either, I mean.
Okay. Chief, let's talk about, let's talk about this issue real quick. Councilmember Tran has talked about if crime is dropping at where our current officer levels, why do we need more officers? Can you address that? And can you also address these additional officers that we're getting? We're authorized up to 134, but obviously in 20, we're going to add those for the transport officer. Can you address these issues?
Sure. Crime is cyclical. We're right now, in a downward trend, and there's a lot of reasons why that's occurring. But I think we need to be strategic and plan ahead. It takes a long time to bring up agency staffing. And the reason we're down so many is we didn't authorize hiring 5 additional bodies until July 1. So once the funding became available, we're working towards hiring the bodies. I can tell you right now that we're enjoying lower crime numbers now. We've only had, one homicide for the year. But I'm telling you that there will be a time when crime's going to go back up for a variety of different reasons. And if to think that the police department alone can, fluctuate the crime numbers, that's a wrong thought process. There'll be a lot of things that could happen. So I would tell you there's a tremendous strain on the police department just to meet the demand for service today. Just to give you an idea, 10 years ago, we had 137 officers. 10 years later, we're at 134. We've been building back up. But just to give you an idea, 10 years ago, we had more police officers than today. And I can tell you that our calls for service is much higher today than it was 10 years ago. So we're playing the management of moving bodies around. We're doing sector policing, sector integrity. We're doing everything we can, but I can tell you that we can do more. If we had more bodies, we can do more community outreach, community building. We are just basically meeting the needs of 911 calls right now. We don't have extra fat to do community outreach and stuff. We're doing the best we can with the people we have. So to think that crime numbers are down now, that we can do with less, I'm telling you, a year or 2 years from now, we might say crime's way high, we got to hire. I can tell you we'll be a year and a half out to bring up those body counts up, and we'll be totally reactive. So I hope that kind of answers the question. The 3 additional bodies to bring it to 137 is part of the leaving score, and we need transport officers. Those officers are going to be tied in court security, transporting prisoners. They're not necessarily going to be available to respond to calls for service.
Thank you.
All right. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I apologize for my lateness. I had a dental procedure today, surgery, so that's why I'm late. I just wanted to clarify, Chief Huang, on C81, it says that 2019 proposed is at 113 for police officers, which is up 3 from the 110 for this year. So is that year to train those officers that are doing the transportation for 2020? Just wanted to clarify if it is indeed 2020 that's going up by 3 or 2019.
Councilor Johnson, we're all turning to C81. And what was you were talking about the general, could you restate your question, please?
Yeah, the 7th line down from positions, it says police officers is at 110 for 2018.
What
and then
page are you on?
113. C81. So if you look at the police officers, it says 110 for this year, and that it's increasing by 3 to 2019 to 113. But I just heard that 2020 was actually the year that we're increasing them. So I'm just wondering what that discrepancy is.
Chief, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I can tell you that 110 is obviously officers that are assigned to Field Operations Division, and increasing to 3, that must have been prior budget preparation numbers, but I do know that the 3 officer increases for actually 2020, not for 2019.
So that's an error in the booklet?
Yes, we're not getting additional bodies in
Okay.
2019.
Okay, so it'll be at 163 in 2019 and in 2020.
We're at 160. We're at total of,
Take a look at the bottom of the graph, Chief.
correct, 170 would have been for, that was for the benefit, the car tab tax. I think with that funding, we were going to increase our staffing, but with that funding going away, we had to reduce the bodies. So that's where those numbers, discrepancies occurred, going to 160 to 170. We were going to go up to, I think, 139 officers. That was the plan, and then without the funding, we had to reduce back down to the other numbers. So we should be at, we're at 163 now. So we should be going up to 166 in 2020.
166 in 2020, the 3 extra for the transport officers.
Yes, the numbers are different because the funding changed. When we were developing the budget, the funding wasn't going to be there, so we had to change the numbers.
And we'll need to bring the transport, we'll need to have those officers on board probably in December to make sure that, or what are you thinking, Chief?
No, we're because of budgeting shortfall, we're going to get by December of 2019.
Okay.
With the staffing that we got, we're going to somehow manage that, and our commander and administrative section will do the administrative work of jail coordinator position, but the funding will be available January of 2020. So we'll
Okay.
gear up to hire someone right at the beginning of the year.
Because we got to have everybody out of score on January 1st to make sure we don't get billed.
That's correct. We'll have probably everybody out second, third week
December
of December.
31st.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay,
I just
Councilor
had to
Johnson.
clarify. So technically, you wouldn't be able to absorb those 3 officers in 2020 within your department to have the transport officers. You're saying you have to have those 3 in order to do the transportation.
I wouldn't recommend it, because in 2020, I mean, the calls for service are going to continue to increase. Our workload isn't going to be lessened, and so that's still 2 years out.
Okay.
Well, a little over a year.
You know, I can tell you that I was talking to somebody today of what happened 2.5 years ago, because it just happened to coincide when something major was going on. I had knee surgery right around that time, and I remember back in May of 2016, over the course of a weekend, I had actually planned a particular time where I thought it was going to be a lull, a quiet time, and I looked at the calendar and I looked at it, and that's when I was going to get my knee surgery, and I said, nothing's on the calendar, nothing's going to happen. And little did I realize that within 5 days of that surgery, there would be 500 people descending on City Hall to where we were, not only was every chair filled, but we were 5 or 6 deep in this chamber, that chamber was filled, and the chamber downstairs was filled. And when I was sitting in my office, and I only say this because it's really, sometimes, times are good right now, but the chief, we were there sort of at a tsunami moment where I remember looking out my office and seeing streams of people heading into the City Hall. I've never seen that many people squeezed into this room. And I think that there was such a palpable anger and frustration and fear. It's one of the reasons why one of the first things that we started tonight was Councilmember Kopang. Councilmember Kopang, we all remember as a community, but Councilmember Kopang was talking about making sure that we honor the findings of the Violence Prevention Coalition, because he remembers that tsunami moment in which you never know when it's going to come. And I think that there was just a palpable fear. And when we can't, now I really think that one of the things is that was a horrible thing that happened in this community. But I actually think what happened in this chamber is we really came together. There was a special moment when a young man got up, and I think his name was Dion, and he ended up on the Federal Way Coalition. And we really came together as a community, and that's why we did those violence prevention coalitions. I only say that because it's so difficult to predict when something's going to happen, and we put in, hundreds of hours of overtime, and where the community was really demanding more officers at that time. And I think that we made a commitment to the community back then that we were going to get fully staffed. I think that there was some discussion about getting us to 140, but we've settled on the 136, 134 frame. I just want to bring that up to give a little bit of historical reference.
Thank you.
I did have a couple more comments. I think that I'm really glad that my colleagues talked about some of these programs on here, Youth Action Team, because it zeroes in on the fact that as a council, we're focusing on prevention, not just enforcement all the time and being reactive. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask Chief, how much of a struggle would it be if as a council, we decided on, we capping overtime at around $500,000, and so that the department would have to come to the council for anything beyond that? Because I think, although that was important, like you said, Mayor, that was important in 2016, but in focusing on prevention efforts, I think taking some type of a stand on how much we're spending in that police overtime. So what can you speak to that a little bit?
Frankly, just historically looking at our overtime budget, it's not budgeted enough. I thought about adding $150,000 to the overtime budget, because the 670-something thousand, we just can't meet it, because the contract agreements that include, double time on 4th of July, time and a half on certain days, first right of refusal by the lieutenant's group, these are all contract agreements that's been accepted by the council. It drives how much that overtime funding is going to be. So be honest with you, I'm short $150,000 just on average each year. So there's no way that the police department, just if we have a year where we have maybe 2, 3, or 4 homicides, there's certain dollar amount attached to the overtime associated with violent crime. So there's no way we can meet the budget at $500,000 just with the current operation of our size and the contract agreements that are in place. I'm actually short. We need another $150,000 is what we need. That's why we're constantly over budget, but we try to make it up in other areas. Maybe just by chance we have salary savings and so forth. We're able to stay within the budget. And we've been able to do that, but we're short on overtime funding.
Okay. And you did mention, though, in the spending, so if we don't spend certain money like this year, it just sits there, it doesn't go back to the general fund?
No,
Is that
it
correct?
goes carry forward funds.
Okay.
They're left
To the
over.
next
and
year.
It's up to policy group to decide how that's used.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Councilor Trent?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I'm just, I need to understand more about the overtime, because, if you are a business owner of the company, right, and you know that every single year, for whatever reason, you have to spend, X amount of money on overtime, would you modify the work schedule or change something so that you can perhaps, not eliminate, but reduce that overtime?
Yeah, there's art to it. You don't want to have too many vacancies. So like I told you, there was a policy decision to not fund, 5 officers till July 1. So by not having those positions earlier on, you're just going to, you don't have the full complementary of staffing in your patrol division. So because of that, there's going to be some overtime incurred. So you have no cushion at all. So when somebody calls in sick, or maybe there's some mandatory training that we conduct. And one of the things we do is we provide monthly mandatory training. So there is, if we're doing training and somebody calls in sick, or a couple of people call in sick during that 24-hour period, there's some overtime attached to that. So being authorized, the 5 additional bodies, we're hiring those bodies. So being close to being fully staffed will reduce overtime, for sure. So that's one of the ways that we manage, and we're constantly talking about how we can manage overtime at the command staff level. We push that down to our supervisory staff. Non-essential training, we don't send people to, and those kind of things to manage. So we're constantly working on managing overtime. And you'll note that if you're following the overtime budget in 2018, we've been able to reduce it from 2017. In fact, pretty significantly, because we haven't had the violent crimes that we experienced in 2016 and in 2017. Primarily, that's the reason, but we've been managing it other ways as well, so we've been able to bring that down.
Right, and that's exactly my point, because, for the last, 4 years, 3 years, things pretty much calmed down. But when I look at your, expenditure, I mean, every year you spend almost $1 million in overtime, and that's concerned me.
But that's not the case this year. We're not going to be at $1 million. We're I can't remember the exact number, but we're substantially lower than 2017 numbers.
Well, let me just say that the one homicide that he referenced is arguably not a homicide. It was an accidental shooting in which an individual was shot. So we don't really have a true homicide in the, just 2 years ago. How many do we have?
In 2016, we had 9 homicides. 2017, we had 7.
Correct. And so when you have a homicide like that, can you explain to the council and the community in regard to what that means in regard to overtime to be able to work those cases?
Depending on the complexity of the case. Sometimes, we can make a quick arrest on it. Sometimes there's just so much leads that we got our teams going every different direction to follow every possible lead. And sometimes they're working with very little sleep, and we do this for like 2 weeks straight maybe to try to solve the case. Because with violent crimes like that, If you let the leads go cold, your chances of solving it reduces dramatically. So you want to follow all the leads possible in that first critical hours.
All right, Councilmember Kopang?
Thank you. Day, had a couple questions on B35, looking at the all funds long-range plan. Going through those numbers, it's pretty clear, as Councilmember Tran had discussed, that our balance is going down year over year, every year. And I know that Councilmember Duclos and the rest of the council has been looking at revenue options, but this, I mean, I'm looking at this and really understanding, and I hope the rest of the city is understanding that as a city, if we don't do something to change revenue, we will be in a very difficult situation.
Yes.
I think the other thing that I think needs to be real clear is that we have deferred maintenance for years now, and that's really not accounted for on this long-range plan, is it?
Correct.
I think the amount of deferred maintenance is probably approaching $7 or $8 million when it's all said and done. If we did everything.
I think during my presentation, part of what I share with the council was, just as an example, this building itself, the City Hall. You know, I think we've been here for a while. I think in talking to our park director, you know, we would need to do some repair to the roof. I think the generator outside, we need to explore, you know, probably replacing or something like that. Dumas Bay is, you know, we need some help. I think based on the improvement that we made to the swimming pool, our community center early this year, that is a sign of some other things that will be coming. They're not here yet, but we need to be prepared for those things. Yes.
Okay. So anyway, just I appreciate you putting all this together. I know you're required by law to do it, but you know, bottom line, I'm looking at this and recognizing that as a city, we need to bring more revenue in.
Correct.
And it's not something that we want to do.
Correct.
But in order for the city to continue to run at a service level that everyone expects, we're going to need to do that.
And I think just to, based on what some of your directors have shared with you in terms of, even though I think Councilmember Tran, in talking about working smarter, I think, you know, yes, there are more equipment, there are more staff that are needed in order for us to be efficient. And yes, it's true, salary alone is not, but I think where the salary plays in, you have some of your staff, I think Mayor Farrell, you know, did salary adjustment in 2014. I think that brought a lot of people up to speed. But I think when the salary study was first done, those other entities are getting 3-4%, while the city was getting 1%. I think that is part of what may affect, you know, even though, yes, the salary may not be the only driving force, but they are comparing themselves to the people that the city compared them to, and they are feeling left behind.
Yeah. And then I think the other takeaway for me is I was looking at the jail contract costs, and it does look like we actually counted for the $500,000 in savings in 2018 or 2019, and then the 2.1 years following.
Correct.
So we are not going to be flush with cash with the change in our jail contract service or the potential of the water and sewer utility tax being implemented. So we still have work to do as a council.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
I'd like to add one thing to that. We also don't have a property tax that most cities have, and that brings in a lot of revenue for the cities.
Property?
Mhm.
We don't have as much. It's not tied. It did, when it locked in, it didn't lock in, obviously, at the higher rate. Yeah, exactly. Okay, Councilmember Sefadasan.
Thank you, Mayor. So as a follow-up to Councilmember Kopang's question about the 2019 and 2020 proposed revenues of 112 and 109
What
million.
page are you on?
Page 35, B35, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And then if you go to B19, it talks about taxes increasing by 1%, wait. Property taxes projected to increase by 1% in 2019 and 20. Sales tax by 4%, 19 and 20, and utility tax by 1%, 19 and 20. So if those are increasing by 1% each year, why is the revenue then going down?
Yes, I think the total revenue, actually, if you, the portion of the revenue that is decreasing, take for example, the property tax. If you look at that on page 35, if you can see that that is increasing. If you also look at the sales tax, that is increasing. If you look at criminal justice, but some other taxes are now moving up as you looking at maybe your proprietary fund revenue. In 2016, we have 1 million. Now it's gradually going down. And other financing sources, that is also depending on where you are compared to 2016. And that is the money that we transfer from maybe from REIT or transfer from utility tax that may not be there.
Mr. Mayor,
Does
can I
does that make
clarify one
sense?
thing?
Yeah, would you?
I don't believe that these are increases in tax rates. This is increases in revenue generated by these particular taxes. So the property tax is, by definition, capped at below inflation. 1% or inflation. So 1% means inflation was greater. So the 4%, and then these other things are not necessarily increases in the tax rate. They're increased revenues based on more sales or more usage.
Actually, for property tax, part of what, even though the way the 1% goes, is it can only increase 1% on the total of what was applied last year. There are new property that may come, that may be built, that will generate additional tax. The 1% does not apply to that. Annexation, the 1% doesn't apply to that. That is why you may actually see your total revenue be a little bit higher than 1% because of the new property that are coming online. This.
Okay.
So with the new development, we're hoping when you have new developers, the 1% does not apply to new property coming online. It's only applicable to your last year and to the property that were taxed last year.
And then one more question, B35, Performing Arts Center, Performing Arts and Event Center. So it's at 1.8 million all the way across for expenditure,
That is B35?
B35 under expenditure
Okay,
for the PAC.
okay. Yep. Hopefully, even though that is being managed by a contracting firm, we will still be reporting the total to you. That is simply because that is there, does not entirely mean it's the city's money. It's just us reporting their revenue and their spending back to you.
So that's as an expenditure. Right.
That is expenditure, correct, the one at the bottom.
Thank you.
All right, Council, any other, Deputy Mayor Honda?
Thank you. In the long-range plan, have you looked at the potential decrease in businesses that could happen when Sound Transit comes in for construction?
I'm sorry.
So when Sound Transit comes in to our downtown to build a light rail station, I would anticipate that we could lose some businesses and therefore some sales tax and that type of thing. Have you
Yeah.
looked at that? And As-
For additional sales tax,
well, have you looked at the impact of Sound Transit in our downtown area in the long-range planning?
actually, I did not factor that in. I do believe that when Sound Transit comes in, it depends on whether people are, which initially, hopefully, people from Tacoma will come in here, park. Hopefully, they'll grab coffee, they'll grab whatever, and, but if they are just getting in and getting out, rather than having impact on the traffic, there may not necessarily be much sales tax. If you are referring to the property that may leave through the construction, I think when we did analysis, I think about a year ago, actually, based on the sales tax revenue from the construction, we may actually be a little bit ahead or be even.
The other thing is, some of those businesses they're getting paid to relocate, and if we can find a place for them to relocate in Federal Way, that would keep the business here and keep their revenue coming in to us. So I think we need to do as much as we can to accommodate businesses into new locations here, not next door.
In fact, last Friday, I was at that, the TDLE, the Tacoma Dome Link Extension meeting in which the possible alignments were narrowed down. One of the proposed stations is where the crossings is right now. And I basically put my foot down. I said, that was a truck stop. It was a Flying J truck stop for decades. And now it's finally been, I said, the city of Federal Way, based on the input from the council and the community, we do not want that to just go away. And there were several different options, one of which was to go closer to the freeway, and obviously that implicates Jet Chevrolet. The other site they're looking at is essentially where the gas station at Costco is, where it swoops off the freeway at 348. Another option they're looking at is across the street at the cement factory, directly across the street, and then getting back. And another option they're looking at is actually to swing all the way over where the Burger King is being remade on Pack Highway. That's probably a less favored alternative, but they're going to be probably right there. And I don't think there's going to be, I made sure I made it abundantly clear. In fact, actually, Deanie, I think I actually invoked your name at this meeting, and I made sure it was, thanks to the input with EJ and Tony Doucette, we made it abundantly clear that I actually outlined particular businesses. And I've actually gotten up at these presentations, and I said, and have pointed to where we do not want to lose these business corridors. So I really think we're talking about, like if they took out Jet Chevrolet, that would have an impact. And then we'd have to figure out where they would go. But I think we're really talking about a handful, less than a handful of businesses versus a wide swath. I think that's important to know.
I think when I look at the patterns of people in Federal Way over the many years I've lived here, if there's a traffic impediment, as there will be when Sound Transit is working in our downtown,
Right.
people will find other places to go to. And I
Yeah.
am a little concerned about the revenue that we may be losing from that. But if the construction sales tax makes up for that,
Yes,
that would be okay.
yes.
But it is a concern of mine.
I think during the period of construction, because they are spending billions, which the one that they construct within our city limit, we will get the sales tax. That will pretty much, neutralize the businesses that may be disturbed after during the construction. When their construction is gone, I think if we're able to relocate most of these businesses back in our community, then for the long run, it will be a neutral. And again, why the people from Tacoma are driving over here and parking before they complete the Tacoma extension, I do believe that if those people are grabbing sandwiches or grabbing grocery or whatever on their way home, that may also have an impact on us.
Mayor, in terms of Sound Transit, isn't it true that they are also going to be putting in low-income housing?
There is, actually, there's a state law that actually coincides with the co-location of these stations with that housing, if it's immediately available and zoned for that.
I'm not going to ask what the zoning is.
Well, I think that's something that, you know, if they put, there's been a real emphasis on transit-oriented development around these locations. We certainly want to see that kind of investment. Ironically, what's happened, unlike what's happened, and I'm not going to go too far into this bandwagon, but, you know, myself and Tim and Brian, you know, previous, we went up to Surrey and Vancouver to really look at the economic development impacts and benefits to having light rail come through your community. And it really is astounding where these places really flower up, where you've got the high rises, you've got that sort of investment where little villages essentially pop up everywhere where these stations are. The SkyTrain, I think they call it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. It's that, I just want the right population, and I'm sorry, I have worked with low-income people all the time.
Yeah.
But downtown, I want us to have a good downtown with good businesses and people that can live there and go back and forth to good jobs and.
Well, ironically, what's happened is this transit-oriented development, as it relates to Sound Transit and Metro, or most likely, you know, like even in our own parking garage, the Sound Transit parking garage, you just don't see that kind of investment. They have been historically unsuccessful. In fact, the one at Angle Lake sits empty.
Yeah.
And so the Sound Transit's plans for TOD haven't really, in reality, caught fire in regard to the adjacent. In fact, actually, the TOD that was right next to the parking garage in our city, where we've got the sculpture park, was gifted to the city of Federal Way for that exact purpose, and it just hasn't worked out that way. So anyway, that's something to keep in mind as well, that while TOD sounds promising on paper, in reality, it just hasn't panned out that way in regard to that sort of artificially generated economic development. But certainly, obviously, you get that many people together and you're going to have investment. So it's an interesting dynamic. Councilmember Sefadossin.
Yeah, we talked about sales generated from the Sound Transit. That the sales tax goes to where the materials are purchased.
Mm-hmm.
So is that going to be something we could ask Sound Transit that they purchase their materials here in Federal Way?
Yeah, we could. The raw materials, obviously, a lot of those are, coming from all kinds of places in the world, but we could certainly ask that.
Because that's the only way then we can see the revenue generated from.
Other than the fact that we're going to be the end of the line for a long time, you're going to see a lot of people essentially converge first in our downtown, and then, because we're going to be the end of the line for a conceivable period. Deputy Mayor, actually, Dini, you've got your light on? Okay.
No,
Deputy Mayor Honda?
Oh, I do. Thank you. So when I look at the budget, there's some things that I'm definitely concerned about. But overall, so I'm going to bring up two things, and not because, well, I'm just going to bring up two things. So one of the items that I think if we could possibly do would help bring in more new employees to the city who might want to come here, not because their pay would be more than someone else, but it could be a perk, and that would be daycare. Mm-hmm. We have a daycare facility in the community center, and it's used for folks who are exercising. And being the grandparent of 5 awesome little grandchildren, 4 boys and 1 girl, I know how much daycare costs, and it could be a mortgage payment. I mean, it is extremely high.
It is.
But if we could offer some kind of decreased daycare, use a facility that we already have, perhaps we could bring in talented folks who would take that as a perk. Maybe we can't pay them what Auburn or Kent or Renton pay them. But if we could help with something like that, it could possibly bring in some people.
Are you thinking about housing it over at the community center where we've got that infrastructure, or here?
At the community center,
Okay.
because we have the 2 or 3 rooms that are already used for either preschool or daycare.
Can you please add that into the list? And what we want to talk about is a daycare center. And I guess my
Yeah.
question is, John, well, can you look into that? And let's talk about the infrastructure there and what you've got there already.
Yes, and just popped into mind when you mentioned that, Deputy Mayor. Those spaces were specifically built not to be licensable because they're for short-term. So they're too small, they can't be licensed. So I'm not 100% sure that would put a monkey wrench in this idea, but need to keep in mind, 2 of those spaces are preschool classes that are very, very, performing incredibly well from a revenue standpoint. The one small area that you mentioned is a daycare for members so they can get in a 1-hour workout or a swim, and the child is well taken care of during that time. But for long-term, I will look into it and see if it's possible, for sure. It's a good idea, but I'm concerned about the size. I know when we built that facility, we specifically didn't want to go through the licensing portion because that's problematic in some areas.
I can imagine it is, but in trying to think of things that could bring employees here or keep employees that we have, if there's, it would just be something to look into.
It's a brilliant idea, and we'll definitely look into it and see what we could, see if it's possible.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
My other idea, and this in no way reflects on you, Mayor Farrell, at all, but when we changed to this form of government, the council at that time listed the positions, and one of the positions is Chief Operating Officer. And I realize that that's a very high-paying position, but perhaps it's something that could decrease your workload so that you can get out into the community more and into the region more, and have the position filled. It was listed as one of the positions when we changed into the form of government. And interestingly enough, when I was researching it, it's an ordinance that was passed on the consent agenda, which was very interesting that an ordinance would be on the consent agenda, in my opinion.
It doesn't require it,
Yeah, but
but it authorizes it to be filled.
anyway, it's something that could perhaps decrease the workload of our directors, your workload, and just have the city operating in a different way. No way reflects on,
I got
it's
that.
just,
Yeah,
I wouldn't be true to myself if I didn't bring it up.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to be true to myself.
okay.
And other than that, I do have some things per department that I want to bring up next week when we meet. But because I do realize it's getting closer to 8, and I want all council members to get in what they want to get in before we have the public speak, because the other things are kind of minor compared to what I just brought up. But I want to thank the directors and the council for the work that they've done on this, and the mayor, because this is truly the most important thing that council does, is to pass this budget. And this budget dictates what the city's going to be doing for the next 2 years and in the future. So it's a very, very important document, and it requires a lot of thought and a lot of thinking, and no idea is a silly idea. If you have an idea, talk about it, because it's the only way that we can see if it'll work or not.
Okay.
So.
Awesome, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Moore?
Yeah, and I think that's a good way, good leadway to what I wanted to say, and that's, I appreciate the conversation that we've all had up here, and I've enjoyed listening to everything. It's very different than what I've heard in the last 2 cycles of the budget. Councilmember Tran, I appreciate your statements. I know they were hard, but they do come with experience. I love how you're able to back up what you were saying with your own experience. I think that adds a lot of merit, and I think it's worthy for us to listen to. It may be different for us to hear it, but I think it's something that is very much in the minds of at least Councilmember Tran.
I call it the courtesy of candor. He just was very, very candid with us, and we appreciate
The
it.
truth sometimes is sometimes not comfortable, but, or someone's opinion, maybe uncomfortable. So I just want to say thank you for your comments. And Deputy Mayor, actually, I like your idea, and I want to put some weight into it so that we can encourage staff to look into this. I really do think, Mr. Mayor, there's merit to the cost of daycare and how that could be a little perk, thank you. That could be a great perk to incentivize employees to come into City of Federal, or prospective employees to work in Federal Way. And just like Councilmember Trans has said, hey, the more we can take care of employees and the more we can do that, the better, it's going to be for them. And so I think that's a really innovative perk that I really would like us to look at, because I think there's just a lot of merit to that. And I didn't think about that, Deputy Mayor. So I think that was a really good idea. And now, I kind of had a question for Thomas or Ade. I have to laugh, Mr. Mayor, because it was about 3 years ago I proposed for the transparency dashboard, and like you alluded to, it did cost $11,000. And when we wait and wait and wait to get a hold of innovation, things skyrocket massively. So just being real with my colleagues, I don't see any of us supporting this at all, which is easy to put up there. $176,000.
Just for clarification.
Yeah, 98,000 ongoing and one time 78. Ongoing 98,000. What does that mean?
Right, that number, the one time is the purchasing.
Right.
Then the 98 is the maintenance. So the first year, we buy it for 78, then we pay the annual maintenance. So the second year, it will just be 98,000.
Okay. And remind me, you sign up for 2 years at a time, or?
Actually, based on what they put out here, I think.
5 years at a time.
Yeah, but if you invest, part of the new deal today is them hosting. That is how they make their money.
Right.
Unlike what used to be, where they sell you the can and they say, well, if you want to upgrade, you pay this. These days, they're saying, we'll host it. And that is where they're making their money. I think in some places, they will even give you the initial fee very small.
So you said 98,000 for the second year. Is that
And third year, fourth year,
That's just the maintenance.
Okay.
ongoing.
So that 98 is good for 4 years.
Is for
5
every year.
Every year.
Every year.
Every
after
year.
on it. Okay.
It's a person, it could be a position.
It's a 5-year agreement.
Right.
Based on the price of the day.
Right. So 98. Okay. So clearly that after all the budget conversations that we've heard, is there an opportunity for a grant for this type of thing? Has that ever been researched? I mean, I hate to ask because who has the staffing time to do that, right? But
Well, we can ask, Thomas, can you look into grant opportunities for something like this?
because
I can definitely spend some time and look and not do other stuff. But
that's the point I was just making.
but
That's the courtesy of candor.
Right, and that's why I was saying I hesitated in asking Thomas, because I understand, Thomas, that you're a busy man and you got a lot of other things, which is why I'm advocating for another staff for your department, but this is an issue that's not going to go away.
I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. As far as grant funds in the past, we've had very good success with police. We've had a really good advocate with police, especially with Kathy Chirac. She applied every year, annually, for the JAG grant. And unfortunately, with a lot of grants and the way that the economic times are, we used to get, I think, Chief, way back in the day, it might be $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. And now it's down to at most like 34 or something like that. So it's come down quite a bit. And And police will apply, and a lot of times we might get some things, either something or some staffing money from the JAG grant, or they'll buy items technology related for the police as well, and sometimes not even technology related. So as far as grant goes, we've been successful there. As many of you learned earlier today, we were successful with the state. So we do apply for grants when the opportunity arises. Now that said, as far as this money, Aday and I both were in a meeting with that vendor, and we were shocked at the cost. And we said, you realize that like 2 years ago, your price was a fraction of this, right?
Exactly.
Oh yeah, well, but we've done so much more with it now. Well, clearly, is it that much more? Is there that much more value in it? I don't know. But that said, that right there, one time, I could hire 2 FTEs minimum.
I get that, yeah.
And there are other tools out there that we can leverage and develop into our own system. The systems that we paid for, the Eden system, our financial system, the permitting system. We can write interfaces with software that we already have to present stuff onto the web. So if you were to ask me would I recommend this and support this, the answer really is no, because I'd much rather have an FTE that we can then direct to say, I want you to create a dashboard using our existing stuff.
Okay.
And I think that would benefit the city much more long term.
And Thomas, I appreciate that last part, because I'm all about, solutions, instead of just saying no, what's the solution? And I appreciate your statement quite a bit. And it's good to know that, and maybe that's something that we ought to consider when we're talking about hiring a staff for IT. Maybe, Mr. Mayor, this is something that we worked into that potential job, is for, the opportunity to write such a code for that interface for our website, so we can make it more interactive for citizens, to allow them to understand that. Now, there is a lot of features that I like that OpenGov does that I think are really valuable, but I think there may be some opportunity there, and I appreciate what you just said. So,
no, I'm happy to answer. And the one other thing is, it does kind of go with Councilmember Tran's statement about working smarter, working more efficient, because by hiring a person that we can task with those type of things, we can automate a lot of tasks. So,
yeah.
All right, Councilmember Duclos?
Are we through?
Just almost.
Okay,
Almost. I've got then Councilmember Tran after you.
again?
No, this is really short, actually.
All right.
This is to respond
Well,
to.
before he gets into his, I just, Okay, first of all, I want to thank the staff and the mayor for, when I first talked to Aday as chair of finance, I talked to him about how we used to present the budget to the council, and we would have meetings, and the staff would come in and do it. However, it didn't take 3 months. It went a little quicker. Of course, we had a smaller budget. But I want to thank the staff for all of their work. I want to thank you, Aday, for leading the effort. And it's been very helpful, because we had new people here who haven't been through the budget before, to expose them to this and to answer their questions. And the people in the audience and the people at home watching, learning more about the budgeting process and understanding more about the city when it comes to money. Now they have a better idea of what we're looking at and why running a city or running any organization costs money. They don't understand all of the varieties of things that have to be covered. So I just want to thank everybody for it. It's been very interesting. It's been very informative, and I hope we pass it soon, because I'm getting tired.
Here. All right, thank you. Councilmember Tran?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to respond to Councilmember Moore about his software. What you want is a Tesla Model S, but we only have money to buy Hyundai.
Right, but it's always good, Councilmember, to give the opportunity to empower citizens to understand through interactive systems their finances. Earlier in the year, we heard hundreds and hundreds of questions of what are you doing with my money, how's it being spent, where is it going, and that's what the system does at the end of the day. And I think it's really important, because it not only helps educate, but it gives them more information, and that's great for transparency as wise.
Okay, before we open it up to public comment, I've got three pink sheets. But is there a consensus that we need the second, the meeting next Tuesday, the 30th at 6 PM? Yes. Am I seeing general consensus?
I just want to know what the purpose is.
Deputy Mayor Honda?
Yes, I believe we do, because we have these things that came up and
Okay.
probably other things as people continue to go through this booklet, this notebook, and listen to our citizens.
Okay,
So-
and that's fine, but I would like us to quantify what we're going to do, and then we need to move on this.
I believe we're headed that way.
Right, and certainly with all due respect to my colleague, you know, this is our, like the deputy mayor said, this is the single most important job that we have as a council. And so if we need time to discuss it and work through it and debate through things to get a good product so we can all be proud of the work that we have voted on, then time needs to be allotted. But, you know, I certainly don't want to rush through a document just for the sake of rushing. And so I think every voice needs to be heard. We need to continue the dialogue, and I would certainly welcome a meeting next Tuesday or another one after that, or 30 more meetings after that. I'm just kidding.
Again, I'm the one that suggested these meetings, so it's not that I didn't want people to have the time, especially since we had new council members that have never been through it before.
Okay, so,
Can
what's that?
I say
Oh,
something?
yeah, please.
I would think that, I agree, we don't need to rush through this. We need to look at it very carefully. And at the end of the process, hopefully by the first meeting in December, we'll have a budget that we will vote 7-0 on. That's the goal. But we have to make sure that we get all of our questions answered and that we know how and what we're doing for the next 2 years and beyond, because we need to plan not just for the next 2 years, but for beyond that.
I also want to say that, the deputy mayor made a candid comment, Councilmember Tran, we've all been very candid, and I really think it's this is obviously the governing document of the city in regard to, our priorities. And so it's good to see this kind of frank discussion and exchange. And so I just want to say thank you. And thank you to staff for your real hard work and follow-up. With that, we are right around the time that we targeted to go toward public comment. I have 3 public comments. Dana Holloway, Lamont Stiles, and Lynn Idahosa. No? Okay. Well, maybe if you listen to theirs, you'll change your mind. I'll put you to the side for now. Okay, Mr. Lamont Stiles. And then Lynn Idahosa. You're on deck. Then we'll ask Dana again.
And thank you, Ade, for taking notes. I appreciate it.
And Ade, we're going to need to, we'll get this printed, and then we'll talk about, we can have some let's make sure that gets emailed to the entire council.
Okay.
And then what we'd need to do is and also, council, we need to be very careful about a quorum via email and discussions back and forth. I'll just say this to the folks that are out in the audience and folks that are watching on TV. We are very scrupulous about making sure that discussions that occur don't ever achieve a quorum, meaning they can't engage more than, a council member can't engage more than 2 members to ensure that a quorum is not reached outside of the realm of, 3 plus a council member is a quorum. So it's just very important that we make sure that the council discussions that are going on never go into that territory. We're very scrupulous about that. And so when you hear about emails, what we'll try to do is get information out to the council, but we're very careful about that information coming back to where we don't, an email conversation that goes back and forth that entails more than 4 council members is a public meeting, and we're very scrupulous about avoiding that kind of conversation. With that.
So 3 or 4?
4 equals a quorum. That's a majority.
You said 2 at first, so I was just.
Well, that, no more than 2. I know, you know what? I know, I got really confusing, sorry.
Could I add to that?
Yes.
It actually gets more complicated because if you have 2 from city committee, then that's a quorum. So it could get really, really complicated, and we are very careful not to break that law.
So when people hear about emails, a lot of it is about information going out, and to make sure that council has information, but there's not something that's occurring where there's a screen where the public's not seeing it. The public sees everything. All right.
All right, thank you for having my comments. Hello, everyone. So I'd just like to jump right into it with the zero-based budget. It doesn't, not to say that I don't believe you guys, but I don't believe about going through and looking at all that stuff, so I would rather to see you go line through line so I can actually see what those conversations are like. Not to say that I don't trust you guys, but I don't trust you guys. So I just would rather to see it. That way, it's not just your word, because I'm going by word of mouth before, and we're not getting what was told to us. So if the thing of it is if you're not going to do zero-based budget and you said you're going to do it, just say that we're not going to do it, and then don't move on and just act like we're not, just gloss over it. But I think if we did look into it, I think we definitely would look and find more than just 200, because if I can say just find 200 and you find 200, then there's probably more to it than that. Police overtime, I don't see anything wrong with committing to 500,000 and then going to the council for more. If you're saying that you're going to come under less, then commit to that and say, okay, anything over 500,000, we're going to come to the city council and explain and say why we have to do that. People leaving because of less pay, again, we're top heavy. The government is top heavy. The school council, school board, or whatever. I won't say council. The board is top heavy. We got a lot of people getting paid $100,000 plus. We're having a lot of issues with staff saying that they're not getting paid. A lot of the money's up front, up top. So the mayor got a $3,000 raise. You guys got a raise. It wasn't big, but 3,000 times 12, that's a lot. Streamlining the government departments, that makes sense, because if you have software or people that you could bring in and to make it faster and efficient, then that's what we're looking for. We don't want a bunch of people that are getting paid a lot of money in this and we're not getting the return on that money that we're paying. Again, making sure the departments are efficient, that the money that's going out is actually being used for that. Crime was low, but we increased the officers, so why not add programs to that? Youth programs, drug programs for drug addicted and the homelessness. Let me see. Spending score money, like we're spending the money already, like we haven't gotten it. We're saying that we're going to get tax revenue, and we're already spending the money before we get it. So we're saying, okay, here we're going to have this, and we really don't know for sure. To be honest with you, the reason that we're in score is not because of the citizens; it's because of our officials that actually got us into that. So I don't count that as a win. I think that we need to make better decisions, and the transit relationship with I have a issue with the relationship. I don't think that everything that we do benefits Federal Way. I think it benefits King County. And what happens if with the PAC, I understand we got a grant, what happens if those positions that we're supposed to get, if we don't fulfill our grant and we default on the grant, what will happen? Will the city be even more in debt? So I think we definitely need to be more better stewards with the money. And I don't care if it takes 2, 3, 4 months. This is our city. This is, if it was your budget in your house, then you would sit down and make sure that everything is everything. So I just expect you guys to do the same.
All right. Thank you. And Mr. Stiles, actually, while you were talking, I was just thinking that a healthy distrust of government is at the very core of democracy. It's what transparency it's about. It's why the free press is so important. And that's why we don't just take our government word on it. That's why the Open Public Meeting Act is so important, and that's why it's so important that we hear from you. So, yeah, I think actually you kind of hit on the very core of what democracy is really all about. So, thank you. All right, Ms. Idahosa.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I just want to agree with Councilman Johnson. I think that it should be, once we reach $500,000, the police department come back to the council. Obviously, you guys have meetings twice a month. I don't see how that'd be too complicated. of a request to make to get additional funding. I'm sure it can be done in advance, so where it's not just like, oh, next week, I need $50,000 more dollars. Like, there's some planning and preparation that can be done. You're pretty meticulous in that way, and I think that's a responsible way to use our funds. I also want to agree with Councilmember Asefa Johnson regarding the Affordable Housing Task Force. When I hear that we're meeting and exceeding the goal, I kind of wonder where and what metrics are being used. People are being priced out all over the state, so clearly those metrics aren't working. Are we the city of opportunity? Because that means we need to be leading in ensuring people here are not broke after paying rent. I agree with Councilmember Tran also, and believe the point he's making is that specifically citizens were told that it would be a zero-based budget. But Mayor Farrell, you're now saying that wouldn't be feasible. I believe in transparency from the government, and I honestly believe that you likely knew a zero-based budget wasn't possible, but used that verbiage as a selling point. As a taxpayer, I see public safety getting well over 50% of our budget as a problem, especially considering how little interest that department has shown in taking consideration from the public in how we're policed and the way crimes of poverty are criminalized here in Federal Way. Councilmember Duclos consistently requests that we all seriously take a look at increasing revenue, and I completely agree. That's not really something we see a whole lot of ideas brought forth, except tonight. I really appreciate Deputy Mayor Honda that your idea was self-funding, and that's something that we need to look towards more when we're looking at these ideas that you guys bring forth in wanting things to be accomplished. They need to have a way of funding and not just spending this, because even in the meeting earlier, we're saying, oh, we have this $2 million. That money's spent from what I can hear. I come to a lot of these public meetings. That $2 million has a whole lot of hands already in it, and it sounds like from what Aday's reported, that money would be better spent saved. We need to be finding, the more you are adding to this new budget, then you need a way to fund those initiatives. As a citizen, I understand you all have a variety of concerns as elected officials, but I really do need to see more. I need your ideas to be more self-funding and more innovative in the way that we're handling problems. We don't want to keep doing the same things that we've already seen other cities fail in. So I know it's difficult, but it's literally mandatory that we police our budget projections in a better way. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And I do want to say that I know there's been some commentary about zero-based budgeting. This was my best approximation of my best approach on how to approach zero-based budgeting. I took as I was going through line by line by line with every department director, there were no sacred there were no sacred cows. I didn't necessarily want to use, there was nothing sacred, there was nothing that we cut as much as we possibly could, and we took, there was nothing that was sacred that we were not willing to look at. And so I used the expertise of the department directors as well, and didn't just indiscriminately cut. And so when I think I want to make sure that it's clear that I didn't just task the department directors with coming up with these cuts. They were day-long meetings in my conference room in which we were going through on the projector line by line by line by line. And so that's my version of zero-based budgeting. I did my best, and now it's in your hands. We've had a good meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. And we've heard, I believe, from every council member. We've heard from the public. And is there anything else for the good of the order before I declare this meeting adjourned? With that, we are adjourned.